Coming up on Booked on Rock, writing a rock and roll book from idea to publication and everything that goes on in between. You're going to get an inside look at the book publishing business from two guys who work in the business.
We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock. I'm Eric Senich. Great to have you back. This episode, this is going to be a fun one. We go behind the scenes to get a look at how the book publishing business works. How do we go from an idea or an inspiration to write a book to getting it published, to getting it promoted, all the stuff that goes on in between? With us are Dennis Pernu and Steve Roth. Dennis is the executive editor of Motorbooks at Quarto Books Publishing. Steve is a friend of mine from a few years back now. He is the senior marketing manager with Motorbooks. Guys, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Eric. Good seeing you.
Yeah, Steve, I've known you now for, 3-4 years now through
At least, yeah.
various channels, the Van Halen world, and you've been such a huge help setting up so many great interviews on this podcast, all these great books that come out through Motorbooks. So it's great to have you on. Let's start with your backgrounds in the business of writing and publishing. Dennis, we'll start with you.
I guess my story is like a lot of other people in publishing. I was kind of the slacker English major in college in the 90s. Thought I was going to go to grad school. Decided I didn't want to go to school anymore when I got my bachelor's and thought I'd get into publishing. I actually kicked around as a bookseller for, 2 or 3 years at Borders, if you remember Borders.
Sure.
Then I finally got into sort of publishing, working on trade magazines. And then in 97, I got my foot in the door at Motorbooks. I actually started out writing marketing copy. And then I guess within 3 years, I moved over to the publishing side as an acquisitions editor and been here ever since. One failed escape attempt in 2016, but that didn't work out. And luckily, Quarto Motorbooks welcomed me back. So yeah, it's been a long ride. I can't believe I've been doing it for this long. It's you blink and decades are behind you.
Absolutely. Steve, what about you?
I came into the publishing world out of, necessity, really. Previously, I was in the music business, record business for 25 years, starting in college back in Connecticut, actually, and moved out to Minneapolis as the music business grew for a long time, especially out here in Minneapolis. And then the music business was contracting with digital media and everything else. And I survived a really long time, longer than I ever thought I would. In 2011, the last indie label I worked for and management company folded, and I was looking for a gig, and I saw it was then under a different unpronounceable name, but I saw a gig doing publicity and marketing, and I knew the imprint a bit, and I saw they had the various imprints, and I saw they had music books, and I thought, I hope my skills can transfer. And 13 and a half years later, it's been a lot of fun, and I've seen the quality of our books improve, and sure enough, yeah, those skills are pretty transferable. And as a matter of fact, I was just thinking Dennis was possibly maybe the second or third person I met back in 2011 when I first walked into the building. So it's been a really fun ride. I still enjoy it and still love what I do.
Well, I think a lot of people listening to this right now, they would probably have an idea for a book and just have no idea where to start. We've often heard the phrase, you should write a book. You got so many stories. Easier said than done, but it can be done. And there's a great quote that I read recently about when you know you should write a book. And the quote was, it's when you have an idea and it won't leave you alone. I like that. So for those listening and watching this interview who want to write a book or are thinking about it, what's the first thing you tell them?
Well, I mean, it's kind of related to what you just said. You have to love what you're writing about, basically. Otherwise, you're just kind of a jobber punching a clock every morning, and it's gonna show in the work. So I mean, I think having a passion for whatever it is you're writing about, whether it's music or something else, is absolutely essential. Otherwise, you're just not going to enjoy it, I don't think. It's going to make it a slog instead of something that's enjoyable for you to do. So yeah, that's the number one thing. I mean, it's kind of the old cliche of following your bliss.
But it's an interesting point because a lot of people could say, well, let me write a book about something that's popular because that's going to sell the most copies. But you're going to run out of steam if you don't have passion for it.
Exactly. And, popularity of the subject doesn't always translate into sales either. It's a bad way to approach it. I'll leave it at that. You just got to love it. Otherwise, it's not going to work out for you. It might work out for you, but it's not going to work out the way you think it's going to work out.
I've never written a book, but I know when kind of that passion and those ideas and those things you want to try to accomplish, they won't leave you alone. I mean, I think probably the hardest thing to do is probably just to get started at it. And I think the whole process, and I know from working with so many authors, to me, every one of them it's so admirable to me that they actually started writing and completed it and followed this all to fruition because it is not easy, right? I mean, if it was easy, everybody could do it. And so many people think they can, but so many people can't.
Say I've written a book about a band that I love. Let's just throw it out there. Van Halen. Let's just throw it out there.
Surprise.
All right, so I want
Hypothetical.
to hypothetical. I want to share it with the world, but I'm not sure if I want to self-publish or go with a publisher. What should I be considering when making that decision?
This is a question that authors sometimes ask me, and I think the thing that people don't get when it comes to self-publishing versus publishing with, a more traditional house is all the backroom stuff that goes into publishing a book, right? So, if someone looks at, usually they're looking, I think, at self-publishing, they're thinking, well, this book is a pie, and the more people have to share it with, the smaller my piece is going to get, which is true. But if you really think about the process of publishing a book and selling a book effectively, writing it is a part of it, sure. But once you get beyond that, you're going to be, if you're self-publishing, you're going to want to hire an editor, unless you can do this stuff yourself. And I never recommend that someone edit themselves. It kind of defeats the purpose. But if unless you have design shops, you're gonna have to hire someone to design the book. You're gonna have to hire someone to license the photography if it's a gift illustrated coffee table type of book. You're gonna have to hire someone to buy your print services. You're gonna have to hire someone to warehouse it. You're gonna have to hire someone like Steve to promote the book. You're gonna have to hire someone to sell the book. You're gonna have to find a place to warehouse the book, in your mom's basement or whatever. If
Garage.
you're lucky in the garage, yeah, you hear all kinds of stories about writers who have pallets full of books in their garages and they can't put their car in it anymore. So there's all this, this sort of backroom stuff that goes into publishing a book. I kind of joke around sometimes and say, it takes a village, but it's really true when it comes to books as well as to other things.
And from the publisher side, somebody comes to you with a manuscript, an unpublished document. What are you looking for when determining if you want to get behind this book?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say it. The number one thing that most editors, I think, ask themselves is this book going to sell? Are people going to buy this book? That kind of takes the romanticism out of the whole process of writing and publishing and book selling. But it's really true. The first thing an editor has to ask is this book going to sell? Is it going to make money? Is it going to lose money? Is it going to break even? If the answer isn't A, it's probably not something that I'm going to follow through on as an editor.
How many people are part of that decision-making process?
It's something that involves, in the first instance, the editor bringing the project to the publisher and the group publisher if they think it's worth pursuing. You got to kind of get the buy-in from your sales staff, see whether they think they can sell the book. Steve has some input onto whether he thinks there are channels to promote and market the book. So, I mean, it's probably a group of, I don't know, 8 to 10 people that are really in on that decision-making process.
Yeah, you ever get some books that it's kind of split decision? It's a
Oh,
risk.
yeah. It's in those cases, that's when it kind of really you get down to the metrics of the whole thing, and you kind of really have to burrow into the history of comparable books that you've published in the past. And usually, if you're on the publishing side of the equation, you're really kind of building a case for the book. Yeah, I mean it's a process. I've been in situations where it's gotten contentious, I guess, but I think at Cordo we've got a really good system, and it's a pretty cordial and collegial atmosphere when it comes to stuff like that.
Have you ever had a book you took a risk on, you just believed in, and it paid off?
That's a great question. I mean, I think we've had books that we knew would do well, but did even better than we expected, I guess. I can't really think of a book that we've, kind of taken a flyer on and said, this is going to do okay, and then it's just gone gangbusters. But, obviously it does happen occasionally.
In general, how well do music books do? Because I know true crime, when you talk about podcasting,
Mm-hmm.
true crime's the big one. I'm assuming it's the same with books. How well does music do?
As a percentage of the publishing industry, I'm not really sure, what would how big of a chunk it is. But I mean, I think music books do pretty well, and I think the anecdotal evidence of that is if you walk into a Barnes and Noble, there's usually, I don't know, 4 full cases of books in any Barnes and Noble store. There aren't a lot, I guess, of sections that are, well, there are a lot of sections that are bigger than that, but there are a lot that are smaller than that too. It's not as big as cookbooks or true crime or fiction, but it's bigger than a lot of other stuff.
Sure. I didn't realize until I started this podcast. I just decided to do one on rock and roll books, and I thought maybe I'll do 1 or 2 a month. I had no idea how many books came out on a regular basis, but I just went to Amazon, looked through all the recent releases,
Hmm.
and sure enough, I mean, there are books coming out all the time.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we've got
And
plenty of competition.
yeah, and it does seem to be a popular subject. How many
Hmm.
manuscripts do publishers see on a regular basis?
Well, again, that varies from publisher to publisher. I mean, I can speak for myself and our Motorbooks editor and our other acquisitions editor, Zach and Jordan. We're probably looking at, for us, we're working on probably 16 to 20 manuscripts a year. We see a few more than that we pass on, obviously, but kind of getting our hands on stuff and getting our hands dirty with actual editorial work. It's about 16 to 20 books a year.
And Steve, I want to get to your job here, and we're going to get into more details about the promotion and all that stuff. But so you come in towards the end, after all those decisions are made, and when do you start to come in? When the book is completed, they go to you and say, Steve, we got to get the word out about this book.
It really starts for me while the book is still in production, really very early on, about a year, almost a year in advance. So I'll give you a good example. We have meetings pretty soon to start talking and planning about books that are going to be coming late spring 2026 and then the summer 2026. So that's almost a year in advance. And I will have seen a few pages at this point. I will have been building my marketing plan for these books, doing the research into the author. I know they're on the schedule. I know what they're about. I know the description is written. I have a general idea what they're about, but that's when I really get started on it. And then it really kicks in for me, and we can get into it more later, but from 6 months or so to the actual publication date and then beyond.
Okay, because I usually get an email from you. I'm on the email list, maybe 2-3 months ahead of the book release.
About 90 to 120 days, somewhere around there. So yeah.
What are some of the more interesting or the funny or the crazy manuscripts that have come your way that, Dennis, that you just said, wow, I can't even believe this person's even...
I thought about that a little bit. We started doing music books in, I don't know, I think our first one was 2005 or 2006. I used to work in our transportation subjects too. And, in the music side, I can't say that we've really had a lot of funny or off the wall proposals or manuscripts come in. But when I was working on the transportation side, I managed our train list, and you talk about niche interests. I mean, yeah, occasionally you'd get the manuscript about someone who's, wants to publish a book about the steam locomotives of Grant County, Wisconsin from 1873 to 1899. And, they're just sure that there are 50,000 people out there who are going to want to buy that book. And you have to kind
Steve,
of,
have fun promoting that one.
yeah, you have to kind of disabuse them of that notion a little
Yeah.
bit, but not so much in music, but the transportation side. Whenever you get into enthusiast publishing, that's when you really find these people, and God bless them. They found something that they're interested in, and talking about what we were mentioning earlier about following your passion. In the transportation categories, there are a lot of folks like that who are, hyper specialized on one topic, and they'll follow that to the ends of the earth.
And also, you have to step outside of yourself, because everybody is always, oh, I'm so funny. It's like the stand-up comedian. I'm funny,
Right.
man. I could be a stand-up comedian. It's like, well, you got
All my friends say I'm funny.
Yeah,
right? All my friends say I'm funny, and it's different when you're putting something out in front of the public. You have to think of it differently. You got to think of what's
Yeah.
in it for the audience as a
Yeah.
whole. It can't be just about
Right.
So regarding contracts, what are the most common things included in a contract between a writer and a publisher? Are there different variations of contracts?
Yeah, I mean, there are two really basic types of contracts. One is a work for hire, which is exactly what it sounds like, where the publisher is paying the author and, sometimes the photographer to create and provide the content, which the publisher then owns. And then there's also this sort of deal structure that I think most people think of when they think of book publishing, which is an advance against royalty, where you're paying the author a chunk of money in advance as kind of a loan to create the book. And as the book sells, that advance earns out, and hopefully the author gets into a situation where they're earning royalties at some point down the road.
From where I sit, the latter is preferred.
Yeah, among authors, yeah.
Authors tend to work harder, and you just reminded me, not with Motorbooks, but I've had some authors that were work for hire that said, I got paid to write the book, that's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
And they won't promote it all, which is ridiculous because it's like, just doing a little bit to help promote the book.
Oh, so
that's helping you promote you and your brand, that's
right, yeah.
promoting you hopefully for future work down the road.
Not surprised. I would think some have the personality type that they just don't want to go out and promote. Is that the reason? I mean, they're just not into doing interviews?
I mean, there could be a bunch of different reasons. A lot of authors just, and it's rare for us, especially for Motorbooks. I mean, I'm lucky that way. We've got, some very active authors, but I know from some of the other subjects I've covered and just seeing how authors have changed in years past. When I first started here, most authors, they really did not know much about self-promotion. And also that some of them just were not good at interviews, but that's really changed. More and more people get it. I mean, I think that whole thing has really evolved because it had to, but also because, it's really, that's the environment now, you're competing with so many people and things for that attention.
Yeah.
I've found the best interviews are the ones that most of the time, the ones that come to me and want to be on because they're really excited to be on. Mm-hmm. Every now and then I've had a few, I'll see a book I'm real interested in. Can't wait to talk to the author. And it's like pulling teeth to finally get it scheduled. And then by the time they do it, they just don't want to be there. It doesn't happen a lot, but in general.
I mean, I can see that. I mean, if you think about sort of the stereotypical author, they're, cloistered away at a desk by themselves creating a book. I guess those folks are kind of plain to type a little bit, but like Steve
but it's rare actually. I think really.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're talking to somebody who interviews an author or two per week, and
right.
Really, they all have something interesting to talk about. They all have stories to tell.
Well, a lot of them too, even if they're not gonna earn a royalty or hope to earn a royalty on the back end, they kind of understand that they still have some skin in the game somehow, whether it's promoting themselves or getting their name out there. If they write a book, we pay them a fee, a work for hire fee, and the book gets them on a lot of podcasts like this. They understand that, hey, someone else is going to notice me and give me another book. And it's like Steve said, they're kind of, growing their brand a little bit.
Booked on Rock Podcast. We'll be back after this.
Difficult to see. Always in motion is the future.
Let's talk book titles. How important is coming up with a book title, and what are the do's and don'ts when deciding on a title?
I'm terrible at book titles.
Really?
I'll be the first to admit it. I think for the kind of publishing we do, which, is nonfiction across the board, generally speaking, the most obvious title is usually the best title. If we're doing a book on, I don't know, the albums of Willie Nelson, just call it Willie Nelson, all the albums or something like that.
Because the name is what sells.
Yeah.
Or gets the attention.
Yeah. Don't get way into the weeds and pull a song title from an album that he recorded in 1972 that no one knows about and think that it's, a clever title or something, because once you bury the keywords into the subtitle, it just becomes a little bit harder to find online, for one thing. Another thing is, if Steve, when marketing the book, has to explain the title, he's already starting off in the hole.
Right.
You're not doing anyone any favors. So, I mean, I guess that's just a long-winded way of saying it. I think for nonfiction publishing, like we do, especially in the music category, most of the time it's best to be obvious.
I think with podcasting, Steve, you can attest to this. Sometimes when I come up with an episode title, I'm overthinking it. Just less is more. Be simple. If you're talking about a famous band, put the famous band's name up front. It's the first thing people see. They want that's Because when I'm listening to podcasts and I'm searching through, I see a title and I see a band I like. Oh, hey, I'm in. I don't need to really know much more.
Right. Yeah.
What are some of the best book titles you've seen or come up with during your time in the business?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean,
Kind of goes along with what you said. Really,
yeah.
you don't need to get too fancy.
Dennis, I can think of a couple from back in the day. What was it? The first two replacements books you did before my time with the company.
Well,
Well, no,
yeah,
the second one I was here for. Excuse the.
yeah. So that's a good example of where we did take a line from a lyric. We did two replacement books actually, two books about the replacements, and both of them had a subtitle that quoted a lyric from the band, and the second one was "Waxed Up Hair and Painted Shoes," which is a lyric from one of their later songs, and it kind of
That
you
would be
know
Talent Show off of "Don't Tell a Soul" from
that's
1980.
Nice.
I think.
80,
Or
89,
88. Yeah.
89.
Nice.
I happen to love that record and I love that book.
It's
and I
it's a
was
great record.
thrilled to be a part of the company then.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean those were kind of fun titles. We've got a oral history of '90s alt rock coming out that's called Alternative for the Masses this fall. So I mean, I guess when I think about it, it's more like more often with narrative style books that you kind of ditch the prosaic title and come up with a more poetic title and then move the prosaic stuff to the subtitle. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'm selling myself short a little bit. The Billy Gibbons book we did in 2006, I think that was called Rock and Roll Gearhead, which was
I remember that one.
Yeah, you read my mind, Dennis, because I was
Yeah.
thinking about that one, and then the revised and updated edition we did a few years
yeah,
ago.
yeah.
I always thought that was a cool cover. I mean, and a cool title too.
Yeah, so I mean, occasionally you get to be a little creative with titling, but yeah, I think for the most part it's best to be obvious.
Talking with Dennis Pernu and Steve Roth of Motorbooks at Quarter Books Publishing. Let's talk cost now. Cost for a publisher to put together a book in terms of materials used, the type of paper, color versus black and white,
Yeah.
et cetera, because Motorbooks does a phenomenal job. Not just saying that because you guys are here. I mean, these books are so well put together, start to finish. So talk about the costs.
Well, I'm not even sure where to start
Yeah.
with that question. Obviously, the costs begin when you contract the author and you're paying them their fee or part of their fee or part of their advance or whatever. And pretty much the publisher is shelling out money and writing checks through the whole process until the book is printed and in the warehouse, and then we're shipping it out and recouping that money. You're paying, like I said, the author, then the next thing you're doing, you're paying freelance editors, then you're paying freelance designers. You're paying everyone's salary along the way, or part of their salary on a per book basis. Then you're paying the printer, you're paying the shipper, you're paying the warehouser. And all that stuff is kind of figured into. We do a P&L on a book, when we're deciding whether or not we want to publish it. And all those numbers are kind of plugged into a huge sort of calculation. And this machine spits out a number and basically tells you if it's worth doing or not from a financial basis. There's so much money that goes into us, and like you said, Eric, especially when we're doing 4-color printing like we do, it's a lot of money that goes into creating and manufacturing a book.
I'm going to grab a few because I have them here
Yeah.
just to show people who are watching. Hang on. Ozzy at 75, right?
I remember that book.
Just the
Daniel
first one.
Buxton.
But, here's an idea for those watching.
Right.
And for those who are listening, check out the episode on YouTube. So first off, it's in a slip case. Beautiful. Is this across the board? Like once you decide to do a book, it's going to get this treatment, or is it book to book?
So, we have kind of established series, and each book in the series has, some sort of package attributes across titles. And, that's the At 75 series that we started, which we're in the process of changing the titling of it. But, all of those books get a slipcase and one or two gatefolds, I think.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I
Well,
think it has
here you go.
one timeline gatefold.
Let's check it out. So basically this is what it comes in.
Right.
The book comes inside of the slipcover. Actually, before we even get to the book, you also throw in these nice little additional, I guess you could call it posters. This is
sort of
this is
case
something.
candy.
I should put this bad boy on my wall. What do you say? Come on. You got
There
Ozzy
you go.
right there, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So you add these nice little bonus ideas where these are collector's items that you put in there. And what else is? Oh, what's this here? Let's see. What else do we? Oh, this is cool. You got the
Yeah.
glossy color photo of the Ozman.
Yeah, that's a shot by Robert Alford, who used to be a photographer for Cream.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But then, as you get to look at just the cover itself, you got Ozzy's sunglasses, and it's got this really cool material, so it's like shiny where his sunglasses are. And there's Ozzy screaming like a madman. Yeah. But as you now inside, it's laid out so beautifully. Color, that's the timeline, which folds out. So, I mean, I have to imagine this is quite costly, but well worth it on the back end when you get, because you must, I mean, you got these rabid Ozzy fans that are going to buy this book. And so the idea is you want to give them quality. You want to give them something that, because these are books that aren't just you read. These are like, you put these out on a coffee table when friends are coming over. I mean, this is like, it's like
I always,
a piece of the furniture, you know?
I always equated those books, and being just a massive music and rock fan as I am, I always equated those, you know, those big F-75 books, the packaging, all that is like the equivalent of a box set, right?
Right.
I mean, gorgeous packaging, high quality, it looks great on your shelf, but there's also so much stuff in there as a retrospective of that artist or band's career, like a great box set. I mean, when you get a cool box set, you're getting the booklet, you're getting the packaging, you're getting everything, and
Sure.
it's something that you're going to keep for a really long time.
But it's clearly above and beyond. So anybody that buys these books knows that whoever put this together, and it is Motorbooks, that they went above and beyond. They wanted to give you something, give you the fan something beyond just something to read, which is great because there's a lot of great books to read. But again, this is something you put in the living room or the dining room. You got friends come over and they see that, they're looking through it.
It helps that between Dennis, myself, and he mentioned the two other people on the Motorbooks team, Zach and Jordan, we're all like really huge music heads. I mean, you know, we love different genres. You know, maybe you might be more passionate about different genres, but probably not a day or two goes by on our internal corporate chat where we're not throwing some link at each other about something that we saw in Consequence of Sound or some other thing that might mean a few hysterical comments or a few things that remind you of something back in the day. I mean, so it helps that we're super passionate fans.
Are you inspired by other publishers from when you grew up as kids or books that you read? Does that come into it?
Totally. I was a complete bookworm when I was a kid. You know, I played sports and stuff, but I also remember spending like nice, beautiful summer days in the you know, public library in the small towns I grew up in northern Minnesota. Yeah, I mean, I still, you know, vividly remember illustrated books that my parents had around the house as a kid, or that they would buy me when I was a kid, or that I would find in the library. And in some cases, you know, I've kind of gone back and searched those books out on eBay just to have a copy for myself, because at some point my mom invariably sold it at a garage sale or something, and
Oh.
it doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, I mean,
So that's running through your mind while you're making these decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember like the smell and the tactile feel of some books from when I was a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. Cover design, that's got to be really important. What's the process the publisher goes through to come up with a design that everybody agrees on, and what are the challenges?
That could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we talked about contentious stuff earlier. For some reason, everyone feels invested in the cover, it seems like.
And everybody has an opinion.
Some people have three opinions.
Yeah.
Which is welcome. You welcome the passion, but at some point you got to
Right.
make a decision.
I mean, generally, you know, the photo selection for our music list, at least, you know, kind of starts with the editor and the author choosing and bird dogging photos that, you know, are best representative of what the content of the book is going to be. I will say, you know, we talked about, you know, the team that goes into building a book. We have such an incredible creative team at Motorbooks. They work out of our Massachusetts office, actually. But, you know, like that Aussie book you held up back there, you know, the laminated effect on the glasses, you know, that's stuff that, you know, our creative team usually comes up with, you know, those ideas, and then they go out and execute them. Not just our creative team, but also our production team is kind of liaises between the creative design team and the printers and the pre-press houses. So yeah, I mean there's a lot that goes into a cover. It's got to be a cover that is a representative of the content, like I said, but also that again Steve can put out into the world and attract interest with the cover, and that our sales staff can do the same with when they're out on sales calls and things like that. And it also needs to look good on Amazon too, which is
Sure.
the question is not only, how does the book look when you're holding it in your hands, but how does it look when it's as big as a thumbnail on a screen on a phone?
Booked on Rock Podcast. We'll be back after this.
I'm gonna need some pliers and a set of 30-weight ball bearings. What? Fred gets here before I'm back. You can tell him to start without me.
What the hell you need ball bearings for?
Oh, come on, guys. It's so simple. Maybe you need a refresher course. Hey, it's all ball bearings nowadays.
Here's a question that just came to mind. This is actually something, Steve, I think we talked about a while back when the Van Halen at 50 book came out. As far as legal issues, are there legal issues that you come up with? Like for the Van Halen one, you had the red, black, and white stripes, but you didn't have the actual Van Halen logo. You had something that was similar to it. So I'm assuming, like with Kiss too, right? You have to be careful. There's trademark or copyright.
Yeah, so I mean, when you have trademark like word marks, like the Kiss one is a great example. Unless you're titling the book as the unofficial whatever history of Kiss or something like that, you really want to stay away from the famous Kiss word mark or the famous Van Halen logo that like you have hanging up behind you, Eric.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're getting a call from Gene Simmons.
Yeah.
You have infringed on my copyright. Who is this Steve Roth?
That's not a bad image.
You're a handsome, charming man, Stephen, but I'm suing you.
People.
Yeah, you get Paul Stanley calling you up.
Yeah, so I mean, you have to kind of be careful for sure, Eric, but we also put a disclaimer on the copyright page of our book, it's kind of just to be extra safe, I guess.
Do you have any favorite book covers, not just for Motorbooks, but just, like you say, growing up as a kid? Steve, you as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I think about Motorbooks and Quarto, again, full props to our creative department. This Prince book that we just did.
You read my mind. You read my mind.
Upside down.
You got it upside down.
Yeah.
That may be the best of them all. It's got that velvet feel to the slip cover.
This purple flocked cover and the gold foil on the 40, and then again a slip case. There are a couple others that we did long ago under our former Voyager press imprint, which was what we were doing music books under for a long time. We did this Beatles versus the Stones thing, and I don't know if I can do it here, but it has a lenticular cover, lenticular inset, and so when you turn it, it changes from a photo of the Beatles to the Rolling Stones.
Very cool.
So that was
when
fun.
did that one come out?
I think that was 2009-ish.
Oh, so that's before I was doing the show, Steve. Otherwise, I would have had that
before I was working for the company.
Okay. Yeah, Andrea Swenson wrote the Prince book. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, she's great.
She was a great guest.
And then maybe my favorite one is this AC/DC book we did. I think this was also like 2008 or 2009, but this was just kind of like a wild idea that I threw out there, and I never thought it would come to fruition. But the art director for the book put a little spinner in there, so
very cool.
You can spin Angus on the stage.
Well, I'll tell you what. I remember I interviewed the guy who runs the website songfacts.com, Carl Weiser, great guy from Connecticut, small world again. But I remember I interviewed him, and I said to him, just pull out some books that you want to talk about on the show, and that was one of them. And that's the first thing he said. He goes, first thing I noticed was this cover. It was amazing. It was like a turntable, the things going around. So it certainly got people's attention. Steve, do you have any favorites?
Well, it's funny because Dennis reminded me a few years after that, just a few years ago, we did an AC/DC album by album. And I'm a huge AC/DC fan, read everything about them. But that book, I think it was, I don't have it in arm's reach here, but it was red and black.
I have it.
I mean, when I look at covers, I think of, it reminds me of back in the day when I was hanging posters in record stores, and I think that would make a cool poster.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought that
Martin
was just
Popoff,
badass. Yep.
The author.
You got the SG, the hat, he's looking down. I mean, Yeah, that same AC/DC at 50. Yeah, that one in particular too. Yeah.
Or is that? Oh, is this a different one?
No,
You're
but
thinking
that's.
album by
I was
album,
thinking
I'm
that's a
sorry.
good reminder too because I also love that one
Right,
as well. Those
okay.
are some of my absolute favorites.
I
Yeah.
have to look for
so
it.
those,
But
yeah, those
point
those are one of
being,
my,
they're all badass. Anything that has Angus on the cover.
yeah.
Yeah.
Those two really stood out, and it's funny we mentioned that replacements book. I remember. I'm still mad I never kept a copy of that because it's out of print and had so many
Pe
copies in my cubicle and
people are asking insane sums of money for that book
Yeah.
on eBay.
Really?
Yeah, but it was yellow and black. It was just that thing just jumped out at you. So
It had sort of the crime tape.
yes, yeah.
I have a copy of it here. Should find that.
While you look for that, Steve, what about you? Bucket list books, because I know you love Cheap Trick, and there are books out there on Cheap Trick. I know.
Oh yeah.
But are there any bands that you say, man, that really needs to be, or a singer or a specific solo artist?
Here it is.
Oh, that's the replacement one. Yeah,
Just
that's
that
really
Westerberg
cool.
coming at you, swinging man. That is just so badass. Again, that's those are the covers. I think it just reminds me of walking into a record store and just seeing these. You can imagine that as a big poster hanging in a window, right? I mean, it just looks that part.
So yeah, what about bucket list books? Well, let's start with you, Steve. A book that you say, man, how come this hasn't been written yet?
Man,
I'd love to get behind.
I can get really esoteric on some stuff that would never be printed. Like, for instance, or I shouldn't say never be printed, but there's been books, but I would love to see our treatment on one of my all-time favorite bands is Y&T. I'd love to see I'd love to see a Cheap Trick at, what are we, 55, a big deep dive sort of book on Cheap Trick. Lately, I've been listening to and there might be one out there, but I would love to see like a definitive, deep illustrated history on the Ramones. Lately, I just really been getting into them, and I'm reading a big power pop encyclopedia, and there's a big, which I can't even, we didn't publish it, but there's a huge chapter on the Ramones in there. So, I go back and start, watch Edge of the Century and End of the Century, that great documentary.
It's a great documentary.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
It just last 2 or 3 days that's been in my head. I got to think, I'm like, man, what I would give for like a big, I can even envision it, it looks like a gritty New York street corner, right? Bricks or whatever or something.
One of those Roberta Bailey photos.
Yeah. And just something where it's just this really deep illustrative dive into the Ramones in particular. And I back in the day, I wasn't necessarily a big Ramones fan. Now I certainly appreciate it, but it's that history, and I don't know if there's really a book like that. So just very recently, that's been stuck in my head.
Before we ask Dennis for his bucket list books, just so you know, a friend of the show, Tim Derling, self-published a book on Y&T called Down for the Count.
I have it.
To talk.
Thanks,
you have it?
Thanks
Okay.
to you. Thanks to your podcast, I have it.
So shout out to Tim for that, because he's self-published and puts a lot of passion into those bands. Like you said, there just hasn't been enough on them. I think he's got one on Night Ranger coming out soon too. But anyway, so Dennis, what about you? Like, is a book that you've yet to get published that you really would love to?
At the risk of giving away ideas to other publishers,
right? Be careful.
I'd love to see a book on all the gear in Wilco's loft space in Chicago. Just a crazy, insane collection of guitars and amplifiers and effects pedals that they have. I think that would be a really cool book. I've been thinking more about narrative books lately than coffee table books. I'd love to read an autobiography by Mike Watt, the bass player of the Minutemen, Firehose. I think a book on Steve Albini would be interesting.
Who sadly just recently passed.
Yeah. It's fun to think about. What your bucket list would be, I guess. But
also, what about looking into the future? What types of books will work? Because I wonder. You can't go to the well too much on certain topics, but I think there's always an avenue you can go down that you haven't gone down yet on all of these bands. And I'm thinking about two things. One, James Campion, another friend of the podcast, he's coming on again soon for his, he's got a book on Prince, but he wrote a book all about Hey Jude. A whole book devoted to one song.
Right. Yeah.
Is fascinating. I suppose it depends on the song. I mean, we're talking about the Beatles, but you could do that. And another one that I thought was interesting, this was for a different publisher, but it was a book all about stories from fans of the band, the Kinks.
Mm.
Oh,
And the publisher took a risk on it because they weren't sure. Now, I don't know how well the book's done, but I have a feeling it's done well only because the response to the episode, when I had the author on, the numbers are higher than so many others. And the comments,
that's
people
interesting.
commenting on it, people really getting into it, people saying, I'm going to buy the book now that I listened to this episode. So I thought, okay, might be onto something there because fans are passionate and they have
Yeah.
great stories. I mean, literally stories about the bassist from the Kinks back in the day when they were just becoming famous. He literally just showed up at one of the fan club members' door one day and had tea with it was the girl. She was a fan, and he knocks on the door, and the mom's like, "Can I help you?" And he just shows up because she wrote a letter to him. So I just thought that was cool. All those stories, you compile them, you could come up with something pretty cool with any band.
Yeah,
Someday I have to tell you my story of Dave Davies and Ray Davies, but
Yeah.
that might be another podcast. But I was just thinking, I don't know if there's ever been, I've really been obsessed for a long time. I wouldn't say obsessed, but I've really been into like almost just digging out and finding and really getting into Bob Ezrin, the producer Bob Ezrin. The guy has
Sure.
produced. You think his production work is so varied. I mean, from Alice Cooper to the Jayhawks to he single-handedly helped resurrect some of Deep Purple's best output in the second half of their career with 4 or 5 albums, and he gets co-writes on every record. And then there's
Right.
think of Destroyer, Pink Floyd. I mean,
He's on some surprising records that you
Yeah.
wouldn't even think.
I would read an autobiography or a biography on him, an oral history, anything, because I just think I mean, I buy records that I didn't know he was a part of just because he's a part of it.
Do we know if he's written a book?
I'd have to look it up. I mean, I do not know. I don't think he's written
I
a
don't
book.
think so. No, that would be a great book.
But I love reading books on producers. I mean, what was it, 2 years ago? Tom Werman on the Jawbone imprint, who we used to distribute years ago. But the Tom Werman book was fascinating. I love hearing those. For me, it's always, I love to hear and read anything behind the proverbial curtain. I love to read how things were put together and the behind the scenes stories and things and what happened.
I'm so with you on that, Steve. There's a book called Behind the Boards by Jake Brown. This is going back a ways now, but he interviewed all of these engineers, producers, and they had all these stories, the minutia, this stuff behind the scenes. And one that always comes to mind, and I tell the story so many times, but I think it was the engineer for Thunderstruck and AC/DC's Razor's Edge. And when they were doing Thunderstruck, Angus did the entire one take, and there was a cigarette he lit up to start, and by the end the cigarette butt just burned down right there. But he was so focused, laser focused, and all they had to do was just fade it down and fade it up throughout the song.
Mike
Stuff like
Frazier,
that.
right?
Mike Frazier.
Yeah.
You got it.
those fly on the wall type of books are, it's kind of what those are. Kind of bring you in on the creative process a little bit, which is pretty interesting. There's a lot of value to that, I think, for music fans.
But I'm also on the other side of this, and I'm curious to see what you guys think about this. When you have a band where there's been so many books written about them, I don't have a problem if somebody writes another book on them and it's not anything new or adventurous or anything. But the way I look at it as somebody who loves this music and this genre, just the fact that they're just keeping that band's name alive, and there's a whole new generation of younger people that really don't realize that there are a bunch of books that were written about them before, and they happen to see this one come up on the internet, Amazon, whatever, and they say, "Oh yeah, let me buy it. I'm curious about this band. I never, I don't know much about them." But there are people who they'll criticize a book if it doesn't have anything new in it. What's your
Right.
position on that?
Well, I mean, let's take Rush as a good example. I think we've got a book on 2112 that we're working on for, I think, next spring, and that will be Steve, the fourth Rush book we've done.
Yeah.
I think if you find new ways to approach a subject, it's fine. There's invariably going to be, overlap among the books, especially when you include the need for a big selection of photography in the books as well. Not only is your text going to be a little bit overlapping from title to title, but your art program and the books are going to overlap a little bit. But, to your point, Erica, I mean, there is something evangelical to what we do, I guess, for lack of a better word, in so much as we are, I think, putting the word out about these bands and hopefully introducing Rush to, not that they need our help, but introducing Rush to, a new generation of fans, or, maybe even older music fans who never really got into them, when they were teenagers in the 70s or whatever. There's always going to be people out there. Social media has kind of democratized things a little bit, so now everyone has a soapbox that they can get on, and it's pretty difficult to avoid that sort of critical reaction from readers. But that's kind of is what it is, I guess.
I'll
As
give you an
a publisher,
example. It's Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd. I became a fan in 1988. 15 years after it came out. If I came upon a book on Dark Side of the Moon in 1988, I wouldn't have known if there were books about it before that. I would just be, oh man, I'm really getting into this album. The book on the album, I'm buying it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And those album books that we do are kind of, structured to be kind of, I don't know, almost listening companions in a way. So, we felt that was with that album series, which the Purple Rain book is obviously a part of it as well. We kind of felt like that's a new way to kind of organize the subject and present it to the reader. When you get someone like Andrea writing about Prince, she's going to inject a lot of her firsthand knowledge, and she's going to rely on her sources to get hopefully new information on the subject, and just kind of create a package that presents it in a different way that hasn't been done before.
For my favorite bands and albums, and I know a lot of people like this, I devour almost everything on it. So even if I know pretty much the overall story about something or hear a lot of the stories, I love reading a different take, a different opinion on something. And the other thing Dennis mentioned too, as far as how it's, kind of presented. I mean, one of the things I've loved about the At 50 and At 75 series is that, I mean, they're very complete, but those books are presented, each chapter is one of the 50 or 75 events, career, life events, whatever it might be. So it's just a different creative way to look at it in my mind. And so even if I know so much about Van Halen, let's say, I'm probably going to learn something in there. The author's take is going to be a little bit different, but just kind of how it's presented in that order. Yeah, it's sort of chronological, but it's also in event order too, if that makes sense. So
it's also there's a comfort there in a band that you love. If Cheap Trick is the example I think of with you, Steve. If there's a book on Cheap Trick, man, you love Cheap Trick. So you just want to read about your favorite band.
I mean, I've never been one to be overly critical or take that kind of magnifying glass. I mean, I know enough about my favorite bands where I can go, yeah, that's probably incorrect, or yeah, that's kind of the rumor, and now we know differently, or whatever it might be. But I'm still going to enjoy it. You know what I mean? It's like I'm just such an avid reader and avid music consumer that way. I want to dig into it all.
Booked on Rock Podcast. We'll be back after this.
We'll be back with the Magic Tunes for the Armada Room's 2-hour disco swing party after this short break. Till then, don't you go changing.
How do you assess how many copies of a book you want to publish? Do you have to guesstimate? Do you kind of have a feeling how many people are going to go out and buy this book on Ozzy Osbourne or on Van Halen or AC/DC?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a little more than a guesstimate, I guess. We have tools like BookScan that we kind of rely on to know what other books on subject or adjacent subjects have sold over the years. And two, we've kind of built up our own history of sales that we can kind of look to and kind of use those sales histories to determine, what we think a new book on a given topic might sell over the course of looking really first at its first 12 months, but, also kind of at its backlist potential down the road beyond its first year.
Well, let's get to marketing a book. So, Steve, what's the overall game plan when getting the word out? You said something interesting in an episode of one of your podcasts. We're going to promote your new one, but DLR Cast with you and Darren Beltrowitz. And I think it was on one of those episodes you talked about the game plan of spreading it out. Podcasts are really important, especially even the niche podcasts. You want to hit all the markets. So what's your game plan and how different is it today than it was 20, 30 years ago?
Well, I'll tell you, when I first started in book publishing, I saw the same evolution almost concurrently with the music business too. an author would turn in the manuscript and go, okay, I'm done. Send me to a talk show or send me on something, and that's not how it is anymore. So you need to be an author that can help you get the word out. Number one, that's invariably with a good social media platform, but also someone who, in a lot of cases, has connections, does other things content wise on their own, whether it's podcasts or whether it's an author maybe had a radio show, has some different content. Basically, I'm always looking for the most amount of publicity I can get. It's twofold. It's publicity, stuff that will create the demand and give people get that exposure for the book. So while I love, getting something really big on it, I don't count on that necessarily, because for me, it's about finding where the fans are, right? So finding those niches, let's say. So I know from being a fan, but also from doing my research, I know where Kiss fans are most likely going to find out about a new Kiss book. It's podcasts, it's websites, it's message boards, it's forums. Where am I going to place that advertising? Let's say, how am I going to target that fan base with the tools I have at my disposal? So if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
you'd love to have somebody show up on Howard Stern, but
Oh yeah,
I mean,
but
you want to hit all the markets, and it's so
Yeah.
different than it was years ago, where now you have so many different areas you can go to: radio, podcasting, magazines.
yeah, I mean,
Even magazines aren't even.
No, I mean,
really
so
around.
that's
It's
changed.
all-
In my time doing this, that's really changed. I mean, when I first started, I mean, I can remember distinctly looking at this giant list and going, well, what are all these 80 addresses? And it was like, well, that's all where we're all sending. Man, I think it was an Eric Clapton book way back in the day. That's where we're just sending, all these Eric Clapton books. I'm like, did all these people request that? No. I'm like, well, that's like just thinking for the analogy, that's such a scattershot shotgun approach,
And where were those places? Were they radio stations? Were they?
It was radio stations. It was magazines. I mean, the media landscape has changed a lot, but that sort of strategy, one, it gets really expensive. Two, it doesn't really get you much results, right? So I'm looking for reviews, excerpts, interviews, depending on the media outlet. And, obviously getting authors. I mean, this is your podcast is a perfect example on this. I mean, 10 years ago, yeah, music books existed and there was a good number of them, but really we've seen such the last 5, 7 years, 10 years have seen almost a renaissance of music. More people willing to tell their stories. Publishers realize that there's a market for this stuff. And lo and behold, there's a podcast that's strictly on rock and roll and music books. Well, you and different podcasts that are just about rock and roll, or a weekend radio show and different social media, if I can get those places excited about the book, they might not reach a bigger audience and say spin.com or rollingstone.com, but guess what? My book in all those 5 or 6 places is going to impact and drive more sales than that huge media hit.
They all add up.
It really,
They all
yeah.
add up. I just
It
had
really
somebody
is.
just
Where are the fans? So where are they? Where do we reach them? We got to
a
be with
year
where they
after
are.
I did an interview with an author of a book on Yes. A comment came up on YouTube this week. Hey, I'm going to go out and buy this book. This is a great interview.
If I'm just finding out about something and you're just finding out about a book or an album, let's say just now, and it could be 3 or 4 years old, guess what? It's new to you,
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Does it matter to you guys when a book sells? Is it more important that it sells up front? Does that matter?
We build a budget based on what we think the first 12 months are going to be, but
Okay.
we consider ourselves a quote unquote backlist publisher. So, ideally a book's going to hang around for several years after its first year and continue to sell for us.
What about social media? That's got to be huge. You can't force the author to do a lot on social media. Hope that they would.
yeah, I mean, some are better than others. Some aren't so good at social media. I mean, it kind of runs the gamut.
That's a necessity now.
And even there's authors that are on social media as well, but they're not necessarily really good at self-promoting. So, I mean, they'll promote other people's stuff, but, oh, hey, my new book is out. And maybe that's all you get from it. It's like, man, really could have used that post to alert people that's available to pre-order now,
Right.
So, I mean, it can be hit or miss, but I will tell you this more and more with every passing year or so, it's so much different. Authors on the whole really get it. I'd say about 50% of that marketing plan is going to be somewhat dependent on the author's availability and activity very often. That's what it can come down to sometimes. And I always say is they hopefully and most likely know their audience best,
Yeah.
especially when you're on social media.
You really need to post every day on social media, right?
practically. And with different subjects as well. I mean, I get questions from authors all the time. I mean, hey, a year ago, a post like this, or 8 months ago, a post like this on Instagram got 300 likes. Now it got 40. It's like
Right.
Zuckerberg and everybody are messing with algorithms all the time. They want people to spend more money there. So you can't just post once, not every, or even twice. You have to be pretty consistent. And I've stopped losing sleep over, you can search what are the best times to post at this different social media.
I
and
know.
You'll get 5 different, 2 weeks ago it was Instagram every Monday morning,
Chris Jericho had somebody who helped him with his social media and talked about all of that. Time of day of the week, when is it best to do it, how often. And he really drove up, or she really drove up his numbers. But man, I don't know if I have the time.
But that's a full-time job. I mean,
right.
For that person to do that, to figure that stuff out, really. I mean, because it changes. The advice she gave and what she did recently won't be the same a year from now. It wasn't the same 6 months before that.
Booked on Rock Podcast. We'll be back after this.
Come back soon, okay? I mean, you know where we are. Tell your friends.
Find the Booked on Rock website at bookedonrock.com. There you can find all the back episodes of the show, the latest episode in video and audio, plus a video highlight and a link to our YouTube channel. Links to all of the platforms where you can listen to the podcast, plus all the social media platforms. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Also, check out the Booked on Rock blog, find your local independent bookstore, find out all the latest hot rock book releases, and before you go, check out the Booked on Rock online store. Pick up some Booked on Rock merch. It's all at bookedonrock.com. What about target number of sales that would determine whether a book's a success or not? What's a good number? What's a great number?
Without getting into specific numbers, and books have different budgets, and some books are more expensive to make than others. I don't recall what it is, but I mean, there's a preferred profit margin we want to be at, right? So the sales team has a sales goal, and they know from a lot of those metrics that Dennis talked about earlier, as far as we look at BookScan, how much to put out there, and those accounts, whether it's Barnes and Noble, Amazon, independent stores, they can look back and go, yeah, you know what, a similar book to this, I brought in 30 copies and sold 10 the first week and 10 the next, whatever. So I mean, it varies from book to book, but some books, we've got different kind of ranking systems. I mean, there's some books that have a bigger potential audience than others. A Prince book, let's say, might have a bigger potential audience because of different factors, that the anniversary of the album, the anniversary of specific moments, that will have a bigger number at that first year, say a book about, a certain guitar, let's say, or something.
Yeah,
Right.
it also depends a little bit on the price point of the book. The higher the price point on the book, the fewer you generally have to sell, but also what kind of expenses you have in a book as well. The more expensive a book is to produce, the more you need to sell.
Right. So there are a lot of variables.
Yeah.
I was a Keith Richards book sold like 500,000 copies, which is, I think that's what it was. But that's if you could sell 1,000 copies, I mean that's a win. But it depends on like you say, it depends on the book, how much it costs to make.
Yeah, I mean that Big Five publishing model is really something that we're not a part of really at
Right.
Cordo. There's been a lot of interesting articles written about that and the economics of publishing those types of books. A lot of those books where they're paying 6-figure advances are never going to earn out. There's a handful of books that are carrying that publisher each year probably. I think we're more steady and more realistic, and we want all of our books to turn a profit and be profitable. We're not publishing something for the sake of having a certain celebrity on our list or whatever. I think we're a little more meat and potatoes than that.
It also helps we're not dependent every year on having that monster,
Right,
that big
exactly.
hit,
Yeah.
that giant book. There's books that, for a lot of different reasons, do far better than first forecasted. I mean, because very often it's it is publicity, it is marketing, but also it's because our sales team will find different opportunities. We produce co-editions in different languages, so if we might not have been projecting a German edition to be a part of the factor at all, but they go sell the rights to that book to publish it over there or in different places, or a book really blows up in places where we are distributing. Those are all great things. That's a bonus.
Here's what I want to know. Are the physical books still selling more than the electronic copies?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Easily.
fascinating? I love that. That's so old school, but It just seems people seem to just like having the physical book in their hand.
Rumors of the death of the print book have been greatly exaggerated.
Yeah. And for our books, I mean, like Ozzy at 75, you showed up. That, it's available on an ebook, but there's no way that translates to
Right.
what that physical thing that you're holding there. And I mean, somebody asked, I was just talking recently to somebody that's like, well, don't you read ebooks? I go, I don't read ebooks at all. Really? Oh, it's so great. And I'm like, I'm on a screen all day long, And it's
Right.
like somebody said, well, yeah, you can read it on your phone. I'm like, I read enough on my phone, I
Isn't-
would
but
rather
isn't
sit
that-
down,
yeah.
turn everything off and read a book,
Isn't that fascinating though, of all the advancements in technology and how it's affected the music business in a negative way in terms of physical sales, but in books that's the only one that I can think of that just didn't translate, and thankfully that's the one where people's like, yeah, I know I could take advantage of, I can have, like you said, I can have it on my phone, but I really don't want it on my phone. I want to have it. It's like mine.
Yeah.
And I find that to be fascinating because it really is the only one that I can think of where people still want to go old school. I mean, we know people are going out and buying vinyl records, but that's still, they're not buying vinyl records in the numbers that they did 40, 50 years ago. But books, yes, it's the same.
Yeah. I think with books in general, I mean, just speaking for myself, but also knowing friends, but particularly music books, you like to build a collection.
Yeah. It's a conversation piece.
Yeah.
Too.
You've got that shelf of all your albums.
Yeah,
Or, I mean, I'm
it
looking
looks
at
cool.
shelves of CDs right now, and you're collecting books, you're consuming that media, but it's also stuff that's tangible, that having that physical piece, it makes you feel good, man.
Booked on Rock Podcast. We'll be back after this.
Hold on.
Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out the Booked on Rock podcast. If you've just found the podcast, welcome. If you've been listening, thank you so much for your support. And make sure you tell a friend, a family member, share on social media, and let people know about Booked on Rock. And if you do like the podcast, make sure you subscribe, give a 5-star review wherever you listen to the Booked on Rock podcast. We're on Amazon, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, and on YouTube Music. You can check out the full episodes on video, along with video highlights from episodes, on the Booked on Rock YouTube channel. Find it at Booked on Rock. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. The last question, what's the biggest misconception people have when it comes to books?
I think from what people have said to me who, aren't involved in publishing or know very little about publishing that I've talked to over the past 25 years or whatever, I think that's still the biggest misconception is that everyone's making a lot of money publishing books. Like everyone's making Stephen King type of money, which is just nothing could be farther from the truth, really. If you think of a book, and for the sake of argument, the price on the book is $20. The publisher is really probably being paid $7 or $8 for that book by the retailer. Of that $7 or $8, the publisher's paying the author, they're paying the printer, they're paying the employees, they're paying the warehouser, they're paying advertising, they're paying marketing. It's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the economics of book publishing. I think most people think if a book costs $20, they're giving Amazon the $20, and that $20 is going in total to the publisher. It just doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
Steve?
Two misconceptions. One, you touched on before. A lot of people think that ebooks have taken over. A lot of people think, oh, it's an ebook world now. And the other thing I found really interesting is a lot of people are under a misconception that the book retail has really, taken a bath, where actually more bookstores have opened the last 5 years than I think the previous 10 years, actually. I mean, Barnes &
Really?
Noble has just been on an upswing. They're opening 50 new stores a year. Independent bookstores have bounced back hugely. I mean, every year there's new independent bookstores opening, or independent bookstores are growing. They're adding a second store. They're successfully being sold. Somebody's retiring and the bookstore is not closing. So that's been really great. I mean, when I first started in 2011, like about the week I started, Borders with nearly 400 stores was liquidating, and they were going out of business, and Walden Books was gone, and people were talking about independent bookstores are having trouble, and Barnes & Noble wasn't doing well. But in the last 5-6 years, and Dennis, I'm sure you'll agree, I mean, book retail has really grown. There's regional chains out there, so that's completely wiped away for a lot of people. That the thing that I still hear that sometimes a misconception that people aren't buying books anymore, or they're not going to books, or there's no bookstores. There's a lot of bookstores,
Yeah, there really are.
Yeah, and try to find somewhere where you go in your day-to-day life where there isn't a book.
Yeah.
Go in your office, there's probably a bunch of books in the cafeteria for people to read. At home, obviously, but wherever you go, there's a book somewhere. Yeah, and the other thing about being the author of a book, it leads to so many other things too, because now you can make appearances on shows and promote yourself, and it's going to say author of.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a snowball effect, and then that could lead to something else. That could lead to maybe some television project or movie, whatever it is.
Leads to writing another book.
It leads to writing another book. So, by the way, can you tell me who's writing the 2112 book? Can I guess?
I want you to guess because I think I know who you're going to say, and I think it's going to be incorrect.
Daniel Buxman?
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Hey, there you go. Daniel, shout out to Daniel if he's listening.
Yeah, Dan's great.
He's one of my favorite guests, man. What a sense of humor that guy has.
Yeah.
He's the best. This is great, guys. Well, before we wrap things up, I want to give you both a chance to promote whatever you'd like to. I know, Steve, you got a new podcast. Like you got the DLR cast going. We can start with Dennis if you want to get the word out about Motorbooks, the website, whatever you want to let people know about.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can access the whole Motorbooks list at quarto.com. We've got, I think, 6 music titles coming out this fall, and another Iron Maiden book, a book on Born to Run, a Willie Nelson book. We have the Alternative for the Masses oral history that I mentioned earlier. And
Greg Prado.
Greg Prado.
Yeah, he wrote that.
That's so great because I know he told me. I knew about this book. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so happy to hear that.
That's coming in the fall. Information's coming your way pretty soon.
Greg's the greatest, man. Yeah, Greg is on Saturday Night Live and you get the velvet jacket or whatever the hell they call it.
5-timer.
Oh,
yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry, Dennis.
No, and then a Tom Petty book in that Ozzy Osbourne package that you showed earlier.
All right, Steve.
Yeah, well, let me promote a couple books upcoming that most immediately. We've got Guns N' Roses at 40 on June 17th, just coming around the corner by everybody's good friend, the very prolific and wonderful Martin Popoff. And then next week, one of our sister imprints, Not Motorbooks, we've got Alanis, 30 Years of Jagged Little Pill. Can't believe it's been 30 years since that record came out. There's a really good way to feel old is to look at some of our book titles and go, oh my God, it's been 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
So we've got some really good titles coming up just most immediately. And personally, I think we're 115 episodes in on the DLR cast. What started as 2 guys just rapping about Dave and Van Halen going, hey, this could be a podcast. And we've got a really interesting and loyal and still growing audience. And then I finally got off the schneid or whatever that saying is after talking about it for years and started a second podcast called Another Cool Rock Podcast that is hopefully as it sounds. So about 7 episodes in and been doing some interviews with some really cool musicians and bands and more on the way. So I just kicked that off in April. So
I've been listening. It sounds awesome,
Thank
Steve.
you.
You're the guy, man. You're the guy to do that. You ask all the great questions. And I will say, though, I think, David Lee Roth has made his comeback. And, I think maybe Dave decided to make that comeback just to give you and Darren something to talk about.
just so we weren't running on fumes.
Guys, thanks so much for doing this. So now we get the inside scoop on the book publishing business. So if there's anybody out there who's thinking about writing a rock and roll book, now you know. Guys, thanks so much.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Great.
That's it. It's in the books.